Good day everyone. My name is Kyle Antonio FABILA from 2BSSE. So today I'll be discussing the concept along with the ideas or perhaps with the theories in studying historiography. So first, I'll be trying to unlock the word historiography. Second, I will try to enumerate what are the significance in studying historiography. Along with these are the elements of historiography and of course with the trends and approaches in studying historiography. So let's proceed. In social science, there is this very common or let's say a generic way of defining historiography. They say historiography is the study of history itself. So when we study the history of a history, then that is historiography. Sa madaling salita, parang tinitignan natin kung paano isinusulat ang kasaysayan ng isang kasaysayan. Kung paano ito isinulat ng mga historian, kung anong lente yung ginamit nila, sa anong oras ito isinulat, sa anong panahon, o kaya anong klaseng inclination meron itong mga historian na ito. Kumbaga, tinitignan natin ang isang kasaysayan ng hindi lamang bilang isang kasaysayan. Tinitignan natin ito ng may madalumat na lente upang intindihin ng mas maigi at ng mas mainam ang isang kasaysayan. So, isa yon sa pinaka-pangunahing pamamaraan ng pagbibigay definisyon sa historiografiya. So, when we say historiography, it is the study of writing of history, including the methods, sources, and interpretation used by historians. It is concerned with the study of development of historical writing over time. So, one of the most important variable in studying historiography is time. Why? Because time is very important in knowing what such kind of way or framework that a historian has when he or she is writing the history. So, along with these are the various approaches and perspectives that have been used by historians to understand and interpret the past. At the same time, historiography is not as simply a matter of recording events as they happen, but also involves analyzing the various factors that have influenced how historical events have been recorded and interpreted. It is very important to include on looking the biases of individual historians, the political and cultural context in which they were writing, and the availability of primary sources, of course, and the other historical evidence. Historiography is an important field of study because it helps us understand how our understanding of the past has been shaped over time and how different approaches to historical writing can lead to different interpretation of the same events. By studying historiography, we can gain more a nuanced understanding of history and the ways in which it has been shaped by the individuals and society that have recorded it. So, isa to sa pinakamadaling pamamaraan kung paano natin titignan ang isang kasaysayan. Una, titignan natin mga ebidensyang ginamit, yung panahon, tawag dito, yung mga approaches, yung mga biases na meron ng isang historian upang higit nating madalumat at maintindihan ang isang kasaysayan. So, sa madaling salita, yun ang isa sa pinaka-framework kung paano natin iintindihin ang historiografiya. Alright, so now let's try to unlock the importance or significance of studying historiography. In studying historiography, it is not only important on the part of the student or on my part, but also beneficial on the part of the possible audience who will receive or consume history. So, the significance of historiography lies in its ability to provide not only a surface understanding, but a deeper understanding of history and its role in shaping our present and future. So, here are some of the specific ways in which historiography is significant. For number one, it helps us understand how our understanding of history has evolved over time. So, the trajectory doon sa pag-iintindi o pagkilala natin sa kasaysayan na meron tayo. By studying the different approaches and perspectives that historians have taken to interpreting the past, we can gain a better understanding of how historical knowledge is constructed and of course, how it changes over time. Pangalawa, it helps us identify the biases and limitation. Isa ito sa pinaka-importante. Titingnan natin kung anong klaseng inclination meron yung mga historian na sumusulat ng kasaysayan. Titingnan natin yung mga biases and limitations sa pagsusulat ng ng kasaysayan. So, by examining the political, cultural, and along with the social context in which historical writing occurs, we can better understand the limitation, of course, along with the biases that might be present in the historical record. Kung bakit ito nga sinasabi nilang omnibus probandi, the benefit of the doubt, we should also look, it is also important to doubt at least for some time sa mga kasaysayang sinusulat. Magda-doubt tayo in a way na gusto nating malaman kung gaano nga ba ito katotoo. I mean, the veracity of the information na nire-receive natin. Next, titignan natin yung mga limitation. Ano nga ba yung mga present limitation na meron nung isinusulat yung kasaysayan na yun? Ano yung mga pumipigil? Ano yung mga umahadlang? Alright? Maaari kasi may mga pumipigil kaya hindi na ibibigay ng buo o ng higit na wasto ang isang kasaysayan. Let's say, for example, sa panahon ng diktadurya, okay? Walang nakakapagsulat masyado ng kasaysayan. Sa panahon ng makalumang panahon, kung saan hindi pa ganun tawag dito, hindi lahat marunong magsulat pa. Yung way ng pag-transmit ng information is orally than writing, so parang hirap ipasa yung mga impormasyon. Isa yun sa mga limitation na tinitignan natin. At napaka-importante rin, maliban sa limitation, is yung biases nung pagsusulat ng isang historian. Pangatlo, it allows us to consider alternative interpretation of historical events. So, by examining different historiographical perspectives, we can gain a more nuanced understanding of historical events and, of course, their significance and consider alternative interpretation that might challenge our existing assumptions and beliefs. And number 4, it helps us identify gaps in knowledge of the past. Yun yung role sana na sana'y nakakamtan natin, di ba? Malaman natin, makita natin yung mga missing pieces to connect the gaps, di ba? Para mas maging solid yung knowledge and information na meron tayo mula sa kasaysayan at gagamitin natin to sa kasalukuyan at higit sa lahat sa hinaharap. So, by examining the sources and methods used by historians, we can identify areas where our knowledge of the past is incomplete or uncertain and develop new approaches and strategies for addressing these gaps. So, overall, historiography is a critical field of study for anyone interested in understanding the past and its relationship to the present. So, by studying the ways in which history is written and interpreted, we can gain a richer and more nuanced understanding of our shared human experience. So that is the significance of studying historiography. Next, we shall proceed on the elements of studying historiography. So there are several key elements of historiography that are essential to the study of history and its interpretation. So for number 1, of course, the historian. Sino nga ba yung magsusulat ng kasaysayan? The historian is the person who writes the history. The historian's personal background, titignan natin yan, yung kanyang karanasan or experiences, the biases and perspective that can influence all the way they interpret and write about the historical events. And pangalawa, primary sources. Primary sources are the original documents and artifacts that provide information about historical events being studied. This can include diaries, letters, government records, at the same time photographs and other forms of evidence that provide first-hand accounts of the past. Pangatlo, secondary sources. Secondary sources are works that interpret and analyze primary sources. This can include textbooks, monographs, articles, and other works that provide context, analysis, and interpretation of historical event. Kung meron tayong primary and secondary sources, meron din tayong tinatawag na historical context. Higit sa lahat na maganda tinitingnan nito. Historical context refers to the social, cultural, economic, and political condition that existed at that time of the historical events being studied. And more importantly, understanding historical context is essential to interpreting and understanding the significance of those events. Palima, yung tinatawag nating historical methodology. When we say historical methodology, it refers to the techniques and approaches used by historians to collect and analyze historical evidence. This can include archival research, oral history interviews, statistical analysis, and other methods used to gather and interpret historical data. And pang-anim, yung tinatawag nating interpretation and narrative. Sa interpretation and narrative, dito pumapasok yung involvement ng interpretation at synthesis. Right? The interpretation and synthesis of historical evidence to create a narrative of events. Historians use their own perspective and biases to interpret the evidence and create a coherent story that explains what happened in the past. And higit sa lahat, panghuli, yung magre-receive or yung magko-consume ng kasaysayan. These are the audiences. Audience, historians write for a specific audience. Merong target pagsusulat ng kasaysayan kung sinong tatanggap na kasaysayan. Whether that it is the other scholars, students tulad ko, or the general public. The intended audience can influence the way historians write and the level of detail and complexity they include in their work. For example, may isinulat akong kasaysayan at ang iniisip kong magbabasa nito ay mga scholars. So, I am free to write it in a more eloquent way kasi alam ko naman yung mga magre-receive nito is higit madali niyang ma-receive or makukonsume yung information, or maaari rin ako gumamit ng mga technical term kasi nga scholars naman yung mga gagamit. Now, kung ang pagsusulat ko ng kasaysayan ay tinitingnan ko na ang magre-receive nito ay mga mag-aaral, maaaring gagawin ko to in a more comprehensive way para mas madaling maiintindihan ng mga mag-aaral. Minsan, nagbabago yung way na pagsusulat natin ng kasaysayan, depende kung sinong tatanggap nito. I mean, kung ang mga i-deliver natin kasaysayan ay para sa mga hindi masyadong, let's say, nakapag-aral, so, maaari siguro gagamitan natin ito ng layman's term para higit nilang maintindihan kung ano nga ba yung isinasalaysay natin. Para magkaroon ng saysay, yung kasaysayan, ibinabahagi natin sa kanila. Kasi minsan, namamatay yung diwa ng kasaysayan kung hindi rin naman naiintindihan ng mambabasa or ng tatanggap ng kasaysayan. So, by understanding these elements of historiography, scholars can better interpret and understand the ways in which history is constructed, interpreted, and communicated. And for last, we will try to enumerate and identify what are the trends and approaches in studying historiography. So, there are several trends and approaches that have emerged in the study of historiography in the recent years. At isa rito, yung una, yung post-colonialism na tinatawag natin. In post-colonialism, it is an approach that examines the ways in which historical writing has been shaped by colonialism and imperialism. It seeks to identify and challenge the biases and assumptions inherent in colonial historiography, and of course, to explore the ways in which the legacy of colonialism continues to influence the study of history today. At pangalawa, yung tinatawag naman natin gender and sexuality. The study of gender and sexuality in historiography focus on ways in which gender and sexuality have been constructed and represented in historical writing. This approach seeks to identify and challenge the gender biases inherent in much historical writing and to explore the ways in which gender and sexuality have influenced historical events. Pangatlo, yung digital history. Digital history is a trend that involves using digital tools and technologies to collect, analyze, and present historical data. This approach allows historians to work with large data sets and to use advanced techniques such as data visualizations and text mining to analyze historical information. Pang-apat, yung global history na tinatawag natin. It is an approach that seeks to understand historical events in a global context, considering the interconnectedness of different regions and cultures. This approach challenges the Eurocentric perspective that has often dominated historical writing and seeks to incorporate the perspective and experiences of non-European culture and regions. At panghuli, yung tinatawag nating environmental history. In environmental history, it is a trend that examines the relationship between humans and the natural world throughout history. This approach seeks to understand how human actions have impacted the environment and, of course, how environmental factors have influenced the historical events. So, overall, once again, these trends and approaches demonstrate the dynamic and evolving nature of historiography as a field of study. And by incorporating new perspective and approaches, scholars can gain a deeper and more nuanced understanding of the past and its relationship to the present. So, we're done discussing the definition of historiography, I have also enumerated the significance, the elements, and lastly, the trends and approaches in studying historiography. Isa lamang ating pakakatandaan sa pag-aaral ng kasaysayan, higit sa lahat, kailangan natin ng malawak na pag-unawa. Kailangan natin ito gamitan ng madalumat na pag-iisip kung paano natin tatanggapin ang isang kasaysayan. Tulad nga ng sabi ko kanina, ang kasaysayan ay hindi kasaysayan lamang. Ang kasaysayan ay nawawalan ng saysay kung hindi natin tunay na nakikita ang diwa na ibinabahagi ng kasaysayan. At higit sa lahat, kung hindi tayo natututo sa kasaysayan at hinahayaan natin itong maulit muli, doon nawawalan ng saysay ang isang kasaysayan. So upang magkaroon ng saysay ang kasaysayan, gamitan natin ito ng madalumat na pag-iisip, ng masusing pag-iisip, at i-apply natin ito sa ating buhay. So once again, thank you for listening to my discussion. My name is Kyle Antonio FABILA from 2BSSE. Once again, thank you.